One of the things that I do in my work as a therapist and as a counsellor is to help people find clarity. And so, in terms of the jumble that we often have in terms of what we want or what's not working for us or how we'd like it to be instead, getting clearer in terms of our thinking and in terms of our needs and in terms of what it is we actually want from life can be a huge thing in itself. And in one of the areas that I think that clarity really helps is when we want another person to do something differently in order to better meet our needs. Because in those situations, what's very, very common, and I can recognise this in me, I'm sure you'll recognise it in you as well, that what's very common is that we will make requests of other people in ways which, when we look at them seriously, they're not that clear. And so even when a person is genuinely in a state of wanting to meet your needs, even when the person is in a state of being really eager and desperate to meet your needs, the lack of clarity often ensures that we don't actually give them sufficient information for them to actually be able to do that in the way that we want. And one of the ways in which we manage that is we'll talk in abstract terms. We'll say things like, I want you to be more considerate. Now, if you suppose that the person who receives that message is completely on board with that, and they're thinking, yes, this is what I'm more than happy to do that because I would like to meet this other person's needs. They don't necessarily know what that means in practice. If somebody said to you, I need you to be more considerate, you might be able to have a decent guess, but it's probably going to be difficult for you to guarantee that you translate that abstract concept of considerateness into something that the other person actually wants. And so the question comes up, well, what does the other person mean by be considerate? And we can only find that out by ensuring that we move beyond just an abstract thought and start to make positive, actionable requests. And what I mean by that is that we get very specific. Because when we get very specific, we give the other person the information that they need in order to give us what we want. And sometimes, of course, people won't give us what they want because a need of theirs gets in the way, or they don't feel connected enough in order to want to meet our needs. That happens too. But there's many situations where they're all too eager to want to meet our needs if they can. But their interpretation of our abstract concept, like be more considerate, their interpretation is a guess that doesn't land. And so they do their very, very best, but they end up with an outcome that's different to the one we really wanted. And so we still remain dissatisfied. And so we don't get our needs met, and then they become very frustrated and think, I tried my best for this person and they're still not happy. And so what we have to do is be very explicit and specific. So in this example, I'd like you to be more considerate. We can start to drill down and say, well, supposing that they were more considerate, what is it that they would be doing, saying, that would tell you that they would be in the level of considerate that you need. And once you start asking that question, you can actually drill down into the reality of it, the specific reality of what it is you would like them to do. And to be able to tell them in such a way that even a third party, even a fly on the wall, would be able to notice whether it was being done or not. So somebody might say to their partner, for instance, they might say, I want us to spend time together. And so what happens then is the pair of them are sat there and the TV is on and they're not talking to each other, but they are actually spending time together. They're in physical proximity. But what they really meant by that request of spend time together, and so even though they're both in the house together, they're unsatisfied, that person is unsatisfied. Because what they really meant is, what I'd like is for us to turn the TV off and have a conversation, say for an hour every day. Now suddenly it's very clear what the person wants, and it's also very clear to the fly on the wall whether they're getting it or not. And it's only when you can translate these abstract concepts that we have, that we demand other people to interpret for us, that we can really become much more likely to get our needs met, simply because the other person knows exactly what it is that we want. So an actionable request like that, where you get into the specifics and say, okay, suppose they were being that abstract concept like considerate or kind or generous or whatever it is that we come up with. Suppose they did what we wanted. How would we know that they were doing it? And that gets you to the actual actionable, specific request that even a fly on the wall would be able to judge whether it was happening or not. The other thing that we do is we will often make requests which are based on the word not, based on the word don't, which of course has the word not in it, doesn't it? It's do not. And so what we'll say to people is, I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to do that. We kind of couch our requests in the one thing we wouldn't like them to do. But of course that leaves an infinite amount of things that might happen instead. And that's the thing that we don't specify. So one great example I like is the person who said to their partner, I really want you to be spending less time in work. And being very eager to meet their needs, they decided that they would do what their partner wanted. And so they took 2 weeks off work and booked a golfing holiday with their friends. Now that isn't what their partner wanted at all. What their partner wanted wasn't simply for them to spend less time in work, it was to spend time with each other. They wanted to see more of their partner, is what they were saying, and scale back the work commitments. But it was interpreted by their partner as a request of, I'm worried about your health and well-being. Look after yourself. Spend less time in work. But what they really meant is spend more time with me. And the problem is when you ask somebody to do less of something or to stop doing something or to base a request around the word not and don't, is that there's an infinite number of things that people could do. And what you're saying is do an infinite number of things minus one. Any one of those things is fine, just not that one. And so invariably the odds of us getting what we need are really quite small when you think of it in that sense. Because they think that all you want them to do is stop that thing, but they don't realise that what you really want is for them to do something else instead. And so when I say a positive, actionable response, it's not just about saying, okay, if they satisfied this need, what would that look like even to the fly on the wall? It's also about catching yourself when your request is based on stop that, don't do that, do less of that. Because what we need to identify is what is it we would like instead. Once we identify what we want instead in a positive way, like it doesn't have the word stop or don't or not in there, again, we're giving people information of what we actually want. And it's true that somebody might still decide that they don't want to meet that need. They might have a need of their own getting in the way, or they might simply not be in a place where they're happy to meet our needs at all for whatever reason. But, most of the time people like to contribute and people like to meet the needs of others. It's kind of a fun game. And what often gets in the way is that our request just isn't clear enough. And so the number one thing that you can do in order to get your needs met is to ensure that those who want to meet them have the specific actionable information to be able to give you exactly what you want. And so when you make a request to get your needs met, make sure it's positive, so it's clear about what you do want rather than what you want them to stop. And make sure it's actionable so that the other person knows exactly what they need to do, that even the fly on the wall is able to judge and measure whether that thing was done or not. And you'll find that the amount of times in your life where your needs get met go up simply because you're asking for them in a way that the other person knows exactly how to meet them. So if you find this episode useful, please do share it so other people can find it useful as well. You can work with me directly. I'm Alun Parry at Liverpool Psychotherapy.co.uk. You can watch all of these on video if you'd like at asliceoftherapy.com. And of course, you can subscribe to this podcast completely free wherever you get your podcasts from. So thanks for listening, and I'll be back again tomorrow with another one.